Hi, Johnny.
Hello, morning.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. We've got lovely weather today.
It's beautiful,
Is
isn't
it
it?
nice near you? Yeah, it's beautiful here. So I'm all right, thank you. Been to the gym.
Likewise, I thought I'd hit it early this morning.
Got to keep it all
Um,
at bay, haven't we?
I certainly do. Yeah, you'll understand when you get to my age.
Oh, I'm not.
like,
I'm not. Yeah, I'm already feeling it. Trust me.
yeah, well, you're doing great, and that's a great way for me to sort of embarrass you a little bit, like you did to me. So let's talk about your plaudits. Um, so, Jonathan Curtis, thanks for coming and
This
having
is
this
your
chat.
life.
This is your life. Um, so, for those that don't know, you are a composer. Uh, I say that because I think you are an exceptional drummer, but you're more than that. So a composer, uh, a pedagogue, a publisher, a performing musician, a teacher, a transcriber. And if we were wearing our other hat together, then that is an exceptional example of a portfolio career.
It is. Yeah, it is. It is a portfolio career. They're all very fancy words, and your five is in the mail. But we've talked about this at great length in other areas. In a sense, I've always felt these are things you have to do to stay alive. That I'm not
Yeah,
sure. I'm not sure people like me, whatever that means, make a conscious choice. I'm going to be this, and I'm going to be this. I didn't set out necessarily to do all of these things in tandem. It was just the way the dice fell, really. And I mean, to me, in some areas, I dabble. And the fact that I do all these things doesn't necessarily imply that I'm any good or successful at them. Anybody can compose, anybody can write, anybody can play a drum to a lesser or greater extent. I think maybe I just persist. that's I keep doing those things for better or for worse, and
but
see.
isn't that the success?
Well, it is. It really is. I've said to you before. My goal has always been sustainability.
Yeah,
So if I find that I'm able to write a book and it sells a little bit and that keeps the lights on, or it allows me to write a second one, or it allows
yeah,
me to compose a piece or practice for a little bit, that is success. I think one of the most pertinent things you said in one of our recent podcast episodes with the creative practitioner was that this is a lifestyle business.
yeah,
Everything we do, and certainly everything I do, is geared towards allowing me to continue producing the work I want to produce, and also to sit here on a Wednesday morning and have a chat in my studio, or to take my daughter to a trip or something like that. This it is success in the way that is meaningful for me. That's kind of divorced from that artistic side, I think.
that's interesting because um, I mean you and I go back quite a way now,
We do.
and we've both changed a hell of a lot.
Yeah.
Do you did the lifestyle comment resonate with you? Did
Very
it?
much so. Very much so. I've quoted it to a number of people since you said that, because I'd never considered it that way. I obviously had considered the nature of a portfolio career, and I have,
Yeah,
despite what I just said, I have consciously tried to build a portfolio from a business perspective.
yeah,
But I've never sought wealth. I'm not. I'm a limited company, and I charge for my services purely out of necessity,
yes,
to pay a mortgage and to sustain my enjoyment. To sustain, to allow myself to do the things I enjoy. But I had never considered it from the point of view of the way you phrased it. But it absolutely resonated. Yeah, I think that's the entire point of everything I do.
so thinking about an earlier version of you and me, but certainly you, does that phraseology does it give you a degree of peace?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, it does, because that was something I never had in my younger days. I think
Yeah,
you and I both struggled with this for various reasons. It does. I mean, the phrase, I think, we talk about self-actualization,
Yeah.
and I whether or not I understand that and whether or not I claim to have attained that, there is a degree where I feel content in where I am and what I'm doing, and that is peaceful. That is a nice place to be. So yes, I suppose. Yeah, you phrased that question really nicely. Yes, there is a degree of peace in feeling that way, because there's always a sense of artistic striving. There's
Yep.
things I want to do and things I want to achieve. But another thing you said, which always resonated with me, there was always a case when I was younger that I wanted to achieve things yesterday. I needed it now, and I needed it to be instant, and I was very frustrated if that didn't transpire.
Yeah.
And I think now, slightly older, slightly wiser, I am extremely happy and content with the life I have, and I am happy in pursuing those artistic goals. And I've also learned, I think, a bit of patience to allow those things to come when they will come. I don't need to fulfill every vision now. I can work towards it and enjoy the process.
Well, there's a lot in that, because there's if we talk about patience, or whatever word you want to attribute to that, I think artistic types, creatives, we've got this curse, and I'm guilty of this, where you'll come up with a project and you won't finish it because you are a creative. You get an idea and then you go off on a tangent and do that.
Yeah.
There's you were at pain with yourself and the world.
Yeah.
I mean, you were, and we can talk about that or not, but equally that's probably helped make you the man that you are, and the practitioner that you are. But equally, one of the things that you are exceptional at is, if you've decided, this is my opinion of you, by the way, you can tell me whether you're right or wrong, or whether I'm right or wrong, but if you've decided that one of your creative ideas is something that you want to share with the world,
Yeah.
you go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
And you're not afraid to do it, or at least you appear not to be afraid to do it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of creatives have got the whole imposter syndrome thing going on, and all of. I mean, I'm kind of unraveling a lot here. The impatience, the struggle, the bravery, tenacity.
The thing about the imposter syndrome and the anxiety and the fear of releasing your own material, I mean, as well as I do, that's exhausting.
It's painful.
It's emotionally exhausting, and it can be very physically unpleasant. Your stress can affect you physically.
Yeah.
And I started in this business when I was 24 officially, and I'd been playing on stage and touring with bands since I was about 17, and I'm now a couple of birthdays away from 40. So over that time, you can either sustain that worry and that anxiety and that stress, or eventually you can just let it go, because it is exhausting. It is absolutely exhausting. Now, that's easier said than done, and I've said to you in the past, there are some products or releases that I've done in my earlier days where I very much felt that way. I very much felt like an imposter, and I very much felt simultaneously proud of them but anxious that they wouldn't be well received. And looking back now, I certainly see things that I could have done better and improvements I could have made. But I think it's part of this idea of self-actualization, which I think is a process rather than a destination, incidentally. But I have come to a point, which I think is just through experience and doing it again and again and again, where I trust myself. I'm not going to release something if I don't think it's good enough. The old adage of being your own biggest critic. I am that, not in a hostile way. I think I've learned to be a lot kinder to myself. But I know when something is good. and I know when something is not good enough or not good yet. So I will simply not release it until I get to that point where I go, yep, I'm really confident with that. And I think at that point, it does become a game of trust. I trust myself at that point to say, this is in line with the vision I had for it. It's not a statement of this is good or this is world class or this is going to sell 1,000 copies. It's this product that I have created, whatever that may be, whether that's a performance video or a book or anything else, is in line with the vision I had for it. And as long as I'm confident in that, I kind of trust that people will receive it as they will. There will be those that love it, there will be those that hate it, and the vast majority will be pleasantly indifferent, which is fine.
Well, for me, for my work, the vast majority will never even know it exists.
Well, quite. That's true of all of us. That is true of all of us. You know, people can sell millions of copies and still your average person on the street has never heard of it, right? You know, there's very few megastars these days where like household names. And I don't think that's the goal. It's not for me, you know. Some independent snare drum pedagogue is never going to be a household name. But that's okay. That's not why I'm doing it.
No. And so, you know, the lion at the beginning of the MGM films.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not going to quote the Latin, but art for art's sake.
Right.
That's what it said.
Right. You know, it comes
That's
back
beautiful.
to that. It is. And it comes back to what we were saying earlier about everything I do is geared towards allowing me to just continue doing that. I will eventually maybe hit a point where I've got nothing else to say or nothing else to produce, and then I might go and sail a boat in the Mediterranean for a bit, to quote you.
Yeah.
But until that day comes, I'll just keep, you know, I've got, like you said, I've started a new project, straight on to the next one, and art for art's sake. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's really important because if I think about my own work, collaborations and stuff that I've written, excuse me, on my own, I'm very proud of it. And I'm also particularly proud that when I look back, where I challenge, I don't think like that anymore.
Yeah.
You know, so if I'm talking about an idea that I've shared in a book that was written 20 years ago, the fact that I'm no longer in that mindset is a testament to my own growth.
Well, I think these things are snapshots of us at the time.
They have to be. They can only be.
Yeah, absolutely.
But equally, and you taught me this, and our friend Mike as well. But you taught me this. It's that I was scared to death about putting out my album last year because I have a particular confidence in myself as a pedagogue and what I believe in.
Yeah.
But I didn't have that confidence as a musician anymore.
Interesting that you use the word anymore.
At that point, yeah.
Yeah. It left. Do you feel like it had left you?
Yeah, because I'd stopped doing it.
Right. Bit of time out the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, could I still play? And I was listening. I can't remember the guy's name, which is no good of me. But I was listening to this podcast, and it was a really famous producer, and he was saying, "Write for you. Don't write for anyone else."
Yeah.
And if somebody else likes it, well, great. And then I thought to myself, that's what I'm trying to achieve with these podcasts. That's what I'm trying to achieve with my work, is that however long I'm on this earth for, at some point I want to look back and say, I wrote that with Johnny.
I did that, yeah.
Yeah. Here's some chats that we've had together.
Yeah.
And they'll make me smile because they will be triggers for many other memories.
It's that idea of contribution. I think that was something that certainly in recent years I've come to be more interested in. When I did my first book of snare drum solos, and published those to the world. And bear in mind, I had no, I don't know how to say it. You know, I was not renowned as a snare drummer or a composer, and I was not renowned particularly, full stop. Yet here I was publishing a book of very difficult snare drum solos, presented in a very highbrow way. You know, these are difficult pieces for performance and recital and audition and things like this, or for study. And it had publishing logos on it, and it was backed by the Arts Council, and I was lucky enough to work with a really renowned percussionist who lent his name to it. And it was like, okay, I'm confident with these. I think they're good. I'm proud of them. I want this to be a genuine contribution. I'm not trying to make them the best in the world. I don't need people to induct me into some hall of fame because of it, but to just have it accepted as a part of the repertoire along with everything else out there was, I think, a really big driving feature. You know, we talk about this imposter syndrome. I wanted them to be seen as just another book of snare drum solos, not, oh, this is this guy's attempt at a book of snare drum solos. You know, I wanted to just make a genuine contribution, and I was really content to have them accepted that way. I know some of my pieces from that book, I'm looking at it on the shelf now, sticking out a little bit. One of the pieces from that book was on an audition list at a college in America, and another one was on a repertoire list for a competition at is it Colorado? I can't remember. There was a state competition for snare drum, and one of my pieces was on the repertoire list, and that was I made probably, you know, a few £100 or something from selling books to those people that were in that competition, which was nice, but it was incredibly gratifying to feel that there were some students on the other side of the world learning my pieces and performing it at a competition. You know, that was incredibly gratifying, because it felt, probably for the first time in my life, professional life at least, it felt like I'd made a genuine contribution to the art form that was therefore bigger than me. Because those people performing that snare drum piece, they don't know who I am, and they probably don't really care. They're just trying to play the notes correctly and do a good job in their competition. Mm-hmm. But even that itself, the work was accepted. The work that I had produced was being accepted and was being utilized in the way that I'd hoped it would be utilized.
So it's a big pat on the back, isn't it?
That was massive pat on the back. Yeah, it was.
You know,
validation.
So is that a driving force?
It was, and I think I only needed it once. I don't need that now with everything I do. I think to have that little validation of that first piece of work I produced in this field to be accepted and to be used in the way I hoped it would be used was enough for me to say, right, okay, carry on now. You're not an imposter. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't take much. I don't need continual reinforcement on every book I release or every solo I write or every performance I play.
Yeah. To
believe that they are contributions, genuine contributions. But I needed it then. And it was.
So when was the acknowledgement the tipping point, the turning point? Or was it something else? Or was it a realization in which that one day you just woke up and felt different, you know, better, different, calmer?
It was a process. It was definitely a process. There wasn't one individual moment. I think there were a few events that all contributed to it. One of the people I was lucky enough to work with when I was working on that project was a guy called Joe Tompkins, who I reference a lot because he's one of my favorite snare drum composers. And he very graciously worked with me. He was a consultant and we had some lessons together, and he contributed some ideas and feedback to my early compositions. And when that was all done and dusted and published, I sent him a copy of that book with the compositions in, and I sent him a copy of all my subsequent books, so he could have them. And he's had 2 books of compositions. He's had the Snare Drum Virtuoso, which is a massive book of difficult etudes for technical study. He's had my latest one, The Rudimental Drummer. And he is an active member of the international snare drumming community. He's a professor at a university teaching percussion. He tours with an orchestra. He's about as legitimate as it gets within the field. And I happened to be having an email conversation with a mutual colleague, a friend of his called Christopher Lamb, who is a well-known snare drum orchestral player. And he said he happened to be on tour in the same orchestra with Joe. And he said every chance he gets, Joe nips off into the corner with his pad and whips your book out and starts practicing one of the pieces. And that was one of the events, as was the piece appearing on the repertoire list. And even the fact that they sell, the fact that someone somewhere in the world is willing to spend hard-earned money on something of mine. Every time that happens, it's a really nice sense of validation. So I think over the course of that period, we're going back 3 or 4 years now, there was a string of things that were happening as these early books were being released that all just served to culminate in this idea of acceptance. And that was very, very powerful.
Well, and congratulations.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's nice. It's nice. But what I find really interesting is how that's deemed to be so unusual, that a person working in a field produces something and has it accepted and manages to sell it. Like, would that be deemed unusual if you opened a hairdressing shop? Or do you see what I mean? Like, why am I an unusual case? Or am I, am I exceptionally successful? Or am I just an example of the way it should be? This is something that puzzles me. Why should it be so worthy of congratulation? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. So, if we just take that question literally, it's worthy of congratulation because it's difficult to do.
Yes, I accept that. Art is difficult to do.
Yeah, but you're not just dealing with art. You're dealing with academia as well. You're dealing with, so there you are. You have your art, the snare drum, which I've championed you and applauded you on that. But also the same is true of the fact that you corroborate all of your thoughts and feelings by a massive amount of academic rigor. And that's not easy either. So there's that, but then there's then the wider, bigger picture, that if we accept that these things are hard to do, we also have to accept that there's going to be people out there that are going to be envious of that.
Sure.
For whatever it's not for me to say what the reason is. I don't know what it's too personal. It's too individualistic to the third party.
Yeah.
But they won't understand. Or maybe they will understand, and that's why they're envious. Or it's more when I tell you for why. I watched a video this morning of Felipe, because I did a podcast episode with him, and he was saying that the more people follow him on social media, the more abuse he receives.
I can imagine. Yeah.
And now that's a whole separate conversation that maybe we could have all of us together on a big one,
Yeah.
But and then he said to me, so I went to this person's channel that was abusing me, and there's no content.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, well, are you sure that this is a real person? Not some bot,
Yeah.
And he says, oh no, he says, look, I've been around, this is a real person. I says, well, how do you feel about it? He says, well, I don't care, but I care enough to respond.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And actually, let's boil it down to what we're doing, right? And I know that that even people listening to this, you know, they won't like it, but they won't. But they will have listened to it to judge that they won't like it, right? But what? Yeah, exactly. But we're not doing anything negative here. You're not doing anything negative in your work. It's a contribution to the art form.
Right. People, I think. I mean, yeah, this is a big philosophical topic, isn't it? I remember being in the shop at West Bridgeford, and Dan was on the counter,
Yeah.
and we were listening to a Guthrie Govan record, and Guthrie Govan was playing in typical majesty, and
Yeah.
Dan, who is himself probably the greatest guitarist I've ever met.
Yeah.
You know as well as I do how beautifully he plays guitar. And he looked at me listening to Guthrie Govan, and he said, "Doesn't it just make you want to quit?" And it launched this big discussion about why that should make you want to quit. And I get it. When you listen to someone at the top of their game, you compare yourself to them, and it's often a negative comparison, so it makes you feel disparaged. But I think there are people who take that as a personal affront. You talked about envy. A lot of it's on confidence in themselves. It's a low self-esteem. Because you're right. If I put out, and I'm very fortunate because it very, very rarely happens. But if I put out something and I get some abuse, it's purely an indicator that person is suffering themselves.
Absolutely.
It's not like, as you say, we're out here trying to influence political opinion or lobby for some action in society. We're just presenting a piece of work that we've done. The social media thing, I think, is a difficult one, because we've talked before about the nature of you just produce the work and they will come. I do very little promotion, and I do very little. I don't know how to describe it. I don't go around with things like the best new drumming book on the market or amazing drummer plays amazing snare drum solo. I don't have time for it. But I think in turn that actually makes me better received, because if I just put out a video of me playing snare drum, all I say is the title of the piece and the book it's from, the composer.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And anybody watching it doesn't know if it's any good or not. They just think, oh, I see what this is like. And they'll either like it or they don't. And that's fine. If I was doing the same video, but it's like world's best snare drummer plays insane snare drum solo, then I'm kind of setting myself up for a retort there, because straight away, even somebody that's not seen the video is going to roll their sleeves up and be like, right, this person, I'm going to have to set him straight. Do you see what I mean? So I think there's a degree where you can take certain steps to kind of mitigate that response. But if somebody if somebody watches one of my pieces and is like, well, this person can't play, he's rubbish, to use kind of phrasing, I'm just going to laugh, because it's not. It's just not true. It's not like I'm out here saying, look, I'm the best drummer in the world and watch me play. It's just, here's me playing a piece. You didn't like it, fine. But I'm not rubbish. It is fine. It's just simply not true. So I'm quite happy to just delete the comment and move on with my life. I think the problem arises when your entire brand or your entire identity is based around this idea of spectacularizing, sensationalizing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And that is a real funny side of the industry, real funny side of the art form.
Yeah. It's a bigger topic that I'd love to explore one time. But I think I'll probably finish here by saying I don't understand social media.
No, absolutely.
And maybe maybe I'm not meant to.
And I think that's okay. I think that's okay. I don't,
Yeah.
and I have no part in it.
Yeah. So let's what what attracted you uh let's do this in two spots, I suppose. What attracted you to the drum kit, and then what attracted you to move to not leave the drum kit, because I know you're still a kit player, as a performer and as a teacher, but this journey into the snare drum specifically. But let's deal with the form. Why the drums and not, you know, because you've you've lived and studied in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Um, was there a musical scene there that you were tapping into that was inspiring you, or was it the way of life, or was it the course? You're clearly there for a reason, and then
Yeah.
you come back to England,
Yeah.
and we meet. But why the kit? Tell me that. Tell me why the kit.
Honestly, I don't know. When I was 6 years old, I was sitting in the bath, and my mum was sitting next to me on the, perched on the loo or whatever, just chatting.
Yeah.
And I said to her, "I'd like piano lessons, please." And she said, "Great, okay." And the very next week, I was booked in with a local piano teacher, and I had piano lessons for about 5 years with this teacher. And I picked it up fast, and I did well with it, and I understood it, but I was lazy, and I never really practiced. I was the typical bright but lazy kid.
Yeah.
Good teacher. My parents got me a piano, which incidentally we still have 32 years later.
Nice.
Yeah. They got me a piano, and they paid for lessons every week, and I enjoyed it, and I progressed, but I just didn't put the work in, as most kids don't. And when I went to secondary school, up to year 7, aged 11, I guess, drum kit and percussion lessons were available. And I said to my mum, I would like to stop piano and take up drum kit. And I honestly couldn't tell you why. There was no burning desire to be a rock star. There was no burning desire to emulate Phil Collins or anything like that. It was available, and I think I'd had my fill of piano. I was probably entering, early teenagehood, very early teenagehood, probably thinking, "Oh, drums are cooler."
Okay.
And beyond that, you'd have to ask me 30 years ago. I don't know, but I took to it very well. I remember I shared lessons. It was a 2-person lesson, so there was me and another kid in the class, and it became very, very clear very, very quickly that he and I were not on the same level. I picked it up very fast. He struggled, and they moved me to an individual lesson, 1-to-1. They put me in the orchestra. They made me do timpani, and they made me do xylophone, and I did not want to do those things. But I nevertheless performed on the drum kit and on the hanging cymbal in the orchestra with the school, and it was fine. Again, I wasn't a child prodigy, but I did pick it up quite fast. But sooner or later, sometime in my early teens, I got into metal, thrash metal, heavy metal, death metal, black metal, all the long-haired screamy stuff, and joined a band. One of my neighbours was a really good songwriter, good guitarist, good singer, and he wrote all these sort of metal songs, and I joined, and that's where I really found the passion for it. And it wasn't so much the drums, it was more the music and the playing on stage and the scene, and I became a massive metalhead, and I started growing my hair and got into that scene, and we would play all around the area, local metal clubs and rock pubs and all sorts.
Yeah.
And I really got heavily invested in that scene. As I say, I grew my hair and got into the leather and the boots, and we were going out as a band. That became my friendship group. That became my identity.
Yeah.
And then university happened, And I carried that on. I bought a Roland TD7 for my dorm room at university and carried on playing. And I would travel I was down in Oxford for university, and I would travel for gigs because I could drive at that time, and I would just drive to wherever they told me, and we'd play the gig. Then I'd drive back to my university dorm room. But in my third year of university, I was doing a combined honours degree. I was studying philosophy with an undercourse, a minor in Japanese anthropology and language. And part of that course was a year abroad in Japan in my third year. So I went to Japan and, for all intents and purposes, had a 1-year hiatus. I did take my pad and I did take some sticks and a copy of stick control. But, you know, I was more interested in girls and going out to noodle bars and stuff like that, and did very little practice. Met Catherine, my now wife, and then came back to Oxford to do my 4th year, and basically called the band and said, look, I still want in. So rejoined the band, and I did a few more years of playing with them. But by that time, I met a chap called Paul Hose, who was a teacher in Nottingham, and I demanded that he give me my grade 8 so that I could start teaching. And
I remember that.
So it was a strange one. I mean, I guess it was quite organic. I do remember, though, vividly, being in a practice room with the band, and it must have been post-Japan because I had short hair and I cut my hair in Japan, and that's like a moment I remember as a before and after. But we were in the practice room and we'd played a show and we were rehearsing these new songs. And I said, look, I want to do this forever. I want to do this for the rest of my life. I love it. I'm good at it. Come on, let's pull our finger out. And I started talking to them about like bank accounts and spreadsheets for finances and stuff like this. And they were all too cool at the time. They didn't want to hear it. They were like, that's not rock and roll. And I said, no, it's not. But I don't want to have to go and get an office job when I graduate. I don't want to have to stop doing this. So I think, and I must have been, 23 or something at that time. There was that sense of, look, I really, really enjoy this and I want to carry on. But that was the lifestyle of the band. You know, that was the rock star glint in my eye, I think. After you and I met and we started working towards the professional side of it, that changed. You know, you fatefully got me into Dave Weckl and Vinnie Colaiuta, which was a heady mix of intoxication that I had no idea even existed. And very quickly I pointed to those two and said, I want to do that.
Yes, I remember that.
But again, this is the thing with the drum kit, and I think this defines my relationship with the drum kit. I was pointing to something else and saying, I want that. It wasn't the drum kit. It was the prestige of playing like a virtuoso. It was the prestige of working with people like Chick Corea, who I really liked at the time. You know, I wanted to be a really world-renowned jazz fusion drummer who toured the world with world-renowned jazz fusion musicians. And you can hear that in my first album.
Yeah.
You know, it was an attempt to emulate the music of Chick Corea and the playing of Dave Weckl. And that entire approach was founded on this desire that I think became a need and an obsession to be like Dave Weckl and Vinnie Colaiuta. You know, I've always been infatuated by virtuosity in any field, music or otherwise. And I saw these two as paragons of what's possible on a drum kit and mastery and everything like this. And I wanted that. And the drum kit just so happened to be the instrument of that. Yeah. So it was never... God, I feel like I'm lying on a therapy bench, but it was never the drum kit itself. It was the things that I had seen others produce on it that I wanted to emulate. And it wasn't even the lifestyle, because I've tasted the touring lifestyle and it's not that great. It was more. No. Do you see what I'm saying? It was.
No, I do.
I was just pointing to what other people were doing and saying, I want that. I want to emulate that, with no idea of what that actually entailed. So I spent years practicing like a madman and studying the drum kit to try to work out how and why they were playing what they were playing. And there was always a tension because I wasn't trying to play for me. I wasn't trying to play for the drum kit. I wasn't trying to play for the music. I was trying to emulate a certain way of playing that I'd seen from other people. And there was just an inherent tension. And I think you said it quite early on. You said, Johnny, you need to be careful because you're going to fall out of love with it. And I dismissed you at the time. Nah, I couldn't possibly. I'm too invested. And I just did. I just did. And fortunately, I'm in a very happy marriage. But I can imagine it's the same way a couple feel when they both mutually acknowledge that it's the beginning of the end. There's just something not right. There's something missing. And I think we both know the way this is heading. That's the way it felt on the drum kit because it was for the wrong reasons. I think ultimately.
But there's a lot going on around that, though, i.e., life.
Mm-hmm.
You became a dad.
Yeah.
That changes everything.
Oh, it does. Yeah, it changes everything. But I think, what was I? I was 32 when I became a dad. And I think we were already well underway on this process by then.
Yeah. Yeah. It is fascinating. I mean, I've spoken about it with you before about becoming a local kingpin.
Yeah.
Rather than because that's where I got it wrong.
Yeah.
I got it completely wrong. I thought that the answer was to get into that club.
Yeah, yeah.
And travel the world doing that. Well, I've been doing this for 33 years, whatever that is, and whatever that means. And I remember saying, having a chat with you, with a long list of other things that I wanted to do in life, not professionally, just to do.
Yeah.
Because I had realised that there was more to life than this.
Absolutely.
But if I was happier doing the other stuff, I would probably enjoy playing more because I would be happier.
Do you remember when we all went to France?
Yeah.
And we were working with Rob over in Marseille, and there was half a dozen, there's 3 or 4 of us, wasn't there? Nish and Kyle and you and me.
Yeah, that's right.
And I was in a mood the whole time. And I even remember on the first night basically saying, look, I don't think I can do any playing this trip. We were due to do a bit of teaching and a bit of whatever.
Yeah.
And I remember we were having a drink at the music hotel where we were whatever, where Rob works. And Kyle, our friend Kyle, said something like, oh, I just love just playing a really tasty groove and seeing people dance to it, and just that's so enjoyable to me. And I just remember thinking, do I feel that? I don't think I feel that. I didn't get... I always loved playing live, but it always felt like it was for a different reason. There wasn't an inherent love of the instrument itself. And I think that love of the instrument is there, but it was just so heavily masked by this need to be seen in a certain way and to achieve a certain thing that I thought I wanted. And all those little episodes always made me question it. Do I really feel that way? You said, I can't remember who it was, but you saw Bonham or somebody and just thought, yeah, I want that. I want to be that rock star. And I didn't really have that in the same way. And there was always a lot of self-questioning. Why am I doing this? Why am I putting myself through this?
I'm still in that zone. That's why I'm doing these chats, because I'm trying to learn from people. People were really worried about me when we all had to lock down.
Right.
They thought I'd go absolutely mental.
Right.
Whereas actually, not to detract from all the suffering that was happening. I had a really nice time.
Yeah.
So much so that I didn't want to go back to work,
Yeah.
and I still don't want to go back to work.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Hence all those conversations with you about lifestyle.
That's it. That's
Right.
it.
And it was my business partner Simon. He levied that to me. We were working in a pub one afternoon, and he said, "Oh, are we trying to grow a business or sustain a lifestyle?" And it was like the end of a Hawaii 5 episode. Stay tuned.
Yeah.
Because and I mused on that for weeks.
Yeah.
Then if I now look back at all the, there's a lot of happiness to look back on. All that. You only take photos of good stuff, don't you? You don't take photos of arguments or whatever. Do you know?
Yeah.
So you look back at all this good stuff, and you think that's all lifestyle. The social media post is the lifestyle. I really enjoy seeing social media posts of people practicing. When we watch these super polished clips, that's the destination. It's not the journey. It's not the process.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it is what it is. That's the product. That's the business. That it is what it is, and you can't change that. I've always been fascinated by behind the scenes stuff in Hollywood. The extras are just as fascinating to me as the film itself.
Yeah.
But the more I get to know myself, the more I realise that what's important for me is the journey. And for those that don't get it, it's going to sound really pretentious, and I accept that because I also accept that there's not enough of me to defend the comment either. Just take the comment. Because I've also learnt to realise that even if I'm sat outside with my sunglasses on, which I will be later, I will be thinking, I will be processing, I will be solving issues at work, or I will be helping someone or whatever. I don't need to be on the tools 24/7 to move forward. So I don't need to play the drums 24/7 to move forward.
Yeah.
I move forward in my heart and in my mind. And then if I sit on the kit and I can't do something, well, that journey is practice, and that's why I'll do it. I won't do it for the sake of it.
Yeah. It's amazing how little being a professional drummer actually entails playing the drums.
Yeah, and you know what? That's a poisoned chalice. It's a double-edged sword, and people need to be careful. And you and I have spoken about that on the creative practitioner stuff. Is that it is business, and I think both of us have had massive shocks to the system within that realization, within that journey.
Yeah.
And then you find where you live, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you make the most of it. So what inspires you today? Is it the pursuit of your own art, including the publications, or is it an external something, or is it a combination thereof? Why are you? Because you have built a wonderful life and lifestyle. You're sat in your studio, which is on your property, and you have windows in which you work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why? What inspires you?
That's a hard one. Um, I think it's probably two-sided. On the one hand, sustaining and preserving that life I've built for myself. As I said, I'm extremely lucky and fortunate in my family life and my home life, and I want to preserve that. So, and I think wrapped up in that is this idea of work-life balance. I could go out and get a job. I'm well qualified. I've got a master's degree. I can go out and get a good job that's well paying. But I'd be out the house 5 days a week. I'd be exhausted. I'd probably be stressed. I'd have less time for my daughter or for my family, and I wouldn't be doing things that make me happy. So I think part of the preservation, or part of the inspiration, I guess, is the preservation of that work-life balance, because it enables me to be happier, which enables me to be a better family man, and enables me to enjoy. Like, what's the point in having this wonderful life if you're out at work all the time? You can't enjoy it. I work from home 90% of the time, so I get to enjoy my house and my studio. I get to enjoy these things, and I get to pick up my daughter from the school bus stop a couple of times a week and play with her and take her to swimming lessons, and I get to do all these things that make me happy. So the fact that I am doing something that allows that to continue is very much, well, keep doing it. If I change something radically, I might change the lifestyle I have, and I don't want to. I'm very happy in that. So there is a pragmatic sense where I am inspired to keep going because it's working. Whatever I'm doing, it's allowing me to sustain this lifestyle, which makes me happy. So I'm going to keep doing it. On the more direct answer to what you're saying, it's kind of linked to what you asked a few minutes ago about switching to the snare drum. As we've established, I don't think, because of that attitude I don't think I ever fit with the drum kit quite the way I wanted to, because I was always seeking something, I was looking for something, striving for something. And that was very much a double-edged sword, because I practiced a hell of a lot. I became very knowledgeable and I became very experienced, and I became addicted, I think, to when I was high, because I was a freelancer. I was doing a lot of session playing, mostly live, but occasional studio work as well. I became addicted to being this young hotshot. Here's this kid barely out of university playing like a maniac, and isn't he great, and all of that. I became addicted. It felt like I was just starting to get a taste of that thing I was looking for, of being perceived in the same way that I was perceiving these great drummers before me. But it took its toll mentally. I wasn't happy because I was always seeking for something more. I was always grasping for these things. And when COVID happened, I encountered the Arts Council, and they had this open grant for project work.
Yeah.
And over the course of about 4 hours over one afternoon, I built this project proposal that was entirely based on the snare drum. And again, like starting the drum kit originally, I couldn't necessarily tell you why. I remember buying a copy of Will Coxon's Modern Rudimental Swing Solos when I was about 14 and being fascinated by it, because it felt like a sense of, I'm holding history. Here's a book from before I was born that is, this is real, this is tangible, this is the history of the instrument, shouldn't we all know this? So I practiced that and studied that, and I realized I was one of the only drummers in the area that had heard of Will Coxon or could play these things, which feeds the ego. And long story short, I think, when I was lucky enough to be granted that project and I threw myself into this world, I realized very quickly that it combined the things I loved and got rid of the things that were causing me grief. So there's an academic element, and I have an academic background. I'm academically inclined. So the fact that there was tangible research into these early composers and the other existing pedagogy on the snare drum, I was really, really excited by that. There's a book called Rudimental Arithmetic by a guy called Bob Becker that explores the relationship between maths and rudiments. And I'm sure 99.9% of the population would hear that and go, oh, for God's sake, who would want to read that? And here's me. I was like, I have to get a copy right now. And when I got the
Yeah.
copy, I devoured it cover to cover. And it was like, I can't believe there were other people out there that think like I do. You know, there was very much a sense of, even though I'd never met this guy and I'd only heard of him when I heard about the book, it was like, this is camaraderie. You know, there's a guy out there who thinks the way I do and is producing this phenomenal work about something I care about and I'm interested in. And I became interested in the history of the instrument, and I became interested in the precision. You know, when you're working on a snare drum solo, there is a degree of precision that appeals to my sense of virtuosity. As I said, I'm infatuated by virtuosity. But it kind of did away with a lot of the stigmas and paradigms you associate with drum kit playing. You know, you ask a lot of people to think of a drum kit player, and I imagine they think about someone like Dave Grohl, where the hair's flying and it's big rock and roll playing. And this is absolutely to speak nothing ill of Dave Grohl. I think he's a great musician and done great things. But if he's the image of a drummer, that's not me.
It's not me either.
No, but a lot of people from the outside, that's their perception of drummers. You know, the old adage about you call a drummer someone that hangs around with musicians, right? The animal style rocker, Keith Moon, bless him. And that just wasn't me. I always felt like I was a little bit too reserved for that and a little bit too intellectually minded, not in an arrogant sense, but in a way that held me back. You've said before so many times in our lessons, you're thinking too much, you're overanalyzing it, you're intellectualizing it, and it stymied my musical creativity on the kit, and it absolutely did. Whereas it felt like I found a new outlet for the same but different art form that actually encouraged that. When you read these composers and the way they thought about the instrument and the way they composed it, it was like reading something I could have written myself. It's like, well, this is speaking to me personally. So these are common. Yeah. You know what I mean?
So no, I do. It's so there's a camaraderie and there's a kinship and a sense of belonging.
Yeah, absolutely. You know? And for whatever reason, I found I was good at it. Because it appealed to my sense of precision. All those hours of practice I did, I was able to focus in very, very sharply on one specific thing, and it kind of exploded. And it felt like all of that pent-up potential that I was building on the drum kit suddenly got released in a new direction, and it was like going with the flow of the stream all of a sudden.
Yeah.
So to answer your question in a very long-winded way, when I found that sense of kinship and belonging, the history and the legacy and the body of work that exists on the snare drum as an instrument just appealed to me in a very specific way, I think, and I embraced it. So, like I said earlier about having this sense of contribution, especially some of the more recent works I've written and released, I just feel like I'm contributing to this legacy. You know, that I want somebody to hold my book and feel the same way that I did about that Will Coxon book. You know, this has got weight to it. This has got history. This is substantial for its contribution to the art form. So that inspires me. We talked about art for art's sake, art for its own sake. I want to produce something for the art form. I think it deserves it. It's owed it. Yeah. Because, you know, especially the latest book I did, in a lot of ways, that was a defense of that legacy. Because I think so many drummers today overlook it or misconstrue it and dismiss it. And they deserve better. The instrument deserves better and the art form deserves better. So it was an attempt to combine all of that thought into, look, this legacy exists, it's important, it defines you as a musician, it defines the music you play. Pay attention to it. I felt that very strongly.
I really understand that, because for me that's what the creative practitioner was all about.
Yeah.
It was a defense, substantiation of saying, look, it's not that I know all. I don't. I don't even for 1 second begin to think or profess that. But I've done it long enough, and I've grown so much and become qualified through research that if you at least follow these principles,
Yeah.
you know, you'll stand half a chance. The rest, there has to be a tint of luck. You know, there has to be a sprinkle of that. Resilience.
Yeah.
You
Oh,
know.
absolutely. If there's one key, whatever success I have now, whatever success I've achieved so far, if there's one thing I put it down to, it's persistence, resilience. I've just stuck it out long enough that I'm still here. Many people fall by the wayside.
You and I had this chat. I said that, you know, you will be a success forever because your art will exist forever. Like you know, God forbid, but you phone me tomorrow and you say, well, you know, I'm selling burgers now.
Yeah, I've had enough.
Yeah, okay, fine, but that body of work is forever,
and that inspires me to have a body of work. I like that. That's a nice feeling.
And you have it already.
I do, and I am. We talked right at the beginning about this idea of pride, and I think it's okay to have pride in your work, and I am proud of my. I am proud of my body of work. Some of it more than others, but I'm proud to have a body of work, and But you know, to come back round to what I was saying, I posed to you the question of, should that be so worthy of congratulations simply to build a body of work? I still maintain, you said it yourself, I am somebody that will just do it. If I want to write a book, I will just write it. And that I think is a superpower. Honestly, to just stop talking and do it.
Yeah.
Honestly, and again, there's no guarantee that it's good, right? By me doing it, it in no way implies that it's good or worthy of praise or it's going to sell. But I did it, and
it's not the point.
Yes, I know, but it's when you look at it in that black and white view, which I'm prone to do. There's nothing I do that somebody else couldn't also do.
I'm not so sure.
Now take that in the spirit that it's meant. Obviously, you know, when you take into account opportunity and luck and, you know, fortunes of birth and things like that. But in a simple sense, if you want to write a book, you can write one. If you want to write a piece of music, you can write one. If you want to practice an instrument, you can practice it. In a real basic sense. I mean, what I'm trying to say is I don't feel there's anything particularly special about me or what I do that means it's inaccessible to anybody else.
No. I accept that, and I wasn't challenging on that basis because they say, don't they, that everybody's got a book in them.
Right.
You know, everybody's got their own story to tell.
Exactly.
And everybody's story is fascinating. You know, when I was challenging you on where I said that, you know, I'm not so sure, is because you are you and you live within yourself. It's very easy to forget how far you've come.
Sure.
Ability alone, let alone.
Oh yeah, it's easier for me to write book number 13 than it was number 1.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, which is interesting because that is interesting. I mean, I'm only starting to realise that I have a body of work because I'm only starting to take a step back and have a look. You know, like I'm working on my. Well, I have a bit similar to you in this respect, and inspired by you as well. You know, I've got 5 albums that are on a project plan, and I know what they are. The second one is a continuation of the first, and then thereafter they'll all be completely different because I'm inspired by lots of things.
Yeah.
I wrote and co-wrote a suite of method books, as you know, that I feel I need to talk more about because as a body of work they make more sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm so forward facing. I'm so like, what's next? What's next? What's next? That actually, like, I ought to take a moment to just take a step back and say, let's talk about this. Let's talk about that. But I'm not very good at it. I'm just not very good at it. Neither are you, by the way.
No,
like,
I know.
because like you've just brought out this new book. I mean, I'm looking at it on this screen over here. The Rudimental Drummer, and it literally on your website, and it says just released, and I'm like, I know, because 10 seconds ago there was something else, and which it's not far off being correct, and well done you, by the way, I do mean that, and I've got copies. So linear freedom, that's excellent, and it hurts me. That book hurts me. I really enjoy teaching from the drum kit coordination patterns. The funk and rock.
Yeah.
Because that's similar to the way I present my work.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that's the only reason I like it. It's just that the creativity within it and the way it's presented is progressive. I like that.
That is a great example of what I was talking about, because I wrote that. Right is the wrong word, by the way, for that book. That is a very content-heavy book and very light on the text, which is quite rare for me. I'm usually quite heavy on the text, but that book was compiled, if you like, out of frustration that it didn't already exist. Because if I'm working with a student and we're working on a new groove pattern, and it's like, right, here's the pattern your hi-hat's playing, and here's where your snare drum's coming in. Here's your bass drum. Right, great. Now let's move that bass drum by a 16th note. And the first thing they say is, I can't picture it. Can you write it out for me? So I go, yeah, sure. And then can you write it out for me when it moves to the 8th note? And can you write it out for me? And then I was like, surely I've got something. So I'm looking through my bookshelf. And the closest I could find was Gary Chaffee's Groove Patterns series, Time Functioning Patterns. And it does the same thing. So, but and I'm a massive fan of Gary Chaffee, and his pattern series changed my life. But in that book, what he does is he compartmentalizes the 4 voices. So here are all the possible right-hand patterns. Here are all the possible snare drum patterns. Here are all the possible bass drum patterns. Here are all the possible hi-hat patterns. Now go and put them together.
Yeah.
And that's great conceptually, but for a student who is new to it and is struggling to visualize the stave with all the notes on it, or to struggle to visualize the pattern, I still found myself writing it out.
Yeah.
So I just thought, well, sod it, I'll do it myself. And it was honestly that case of, well, why not? Nobody else has done it, so I may as well do it.
I agree. And if I was to critically analyze my stuff, my work doesn't do that enough. We need workhorses. That's why I think it's a great tool to have. But also, I think it's really important that students are encouraged to buy work. Not because it benefits you and I. Like they're supporting the industry that they want to be a part of.
Yeah. It's a commitment as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a commitment to what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not asking a lot here.
No, I'm bad at that. I sell very few books to my own students because I don't like asking them. I don't ever want to feel like I'm pressuring them to buy some, because I know parents will say, oh, the teacher says you need it, so you need it, and they'll pay. And I don't ever want to feel like I've done that through coercion. And I know that's not something I would ever do anyway, but I'm also aware how much they spend on lessons. Music lessons are not cheap. And somebody who is coming to me on a weekly basis is already spending a lot of money on me. So more often than not, if we're working from one of my books, I will send them PDFs of the chapter we're working on. And I consider that as part of the service that they're paying for, rightly or wrongly. That I understand there are arguments for both. There are arguments.
I don't think it. Yeah, no, I accept your points there. I don't think it matters. I've had cases where people have come for lessons with me because they bought my books.
Yeah.
But if they come to lessons with me just because they stumbled across me in a sea of people, I give them the books.
Yeah, exactly. And what you described about a lot of my external students, by which I mean those that are usually international or visiting, they have found me through a book or a video, and they come to study with me because of that. They are the ones of my students that generally own my books, and my weekly local students, the vast majority of those don't, because I'll generally provide it just as a resource as part of them coming for lessons. Rightly or wrongly from a business sense, as I said, I would hate to feel that I was coercing sales through parents or people that are already spending a lot of money on me.
No, I think it's okay. I do. I think it's okay because they're paying anyway.
Yeah. They've
back in a paper world, you used to get this thing called a compliment slip,
right?
And it used to say on it, it was a third of an A4, and I mean, the fact that I've got to describe this is like, to modern. I'll tell you another story about that in a minute, but it was a third of an A4, and it would have your business branding on it, and it would just say with compliments. Yeah, with compliments of the chef.
Yeah.
So have my book, enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I've done that. I've done that with the creative practitioner. I've left copies around.
Yeah.
And on the inside page, I've just said, if you like it, take it.
Yeah.
Because if someone's leafing through it and think, oh yeah, okay, great, well, have it with my compliments. Have it.
It's funny, this idea of making money from it, because all of my I do a lot of, I've got hundreds of videos on my YouTube channel, and some of them are quite in-depth tuition and educational content, and it's completely for free. For free, outside of sitting and watching a 30-second ad that YouTube throws up, you can, if you like what I do, you can access literally hundreds of hours of me talking about the drums for free right now. And I'm absolutely okay with that, because a lot of the time that will lead to people coming to study with me or buy my book, which is fine. The problem occurs when those things don't happen. I don't end my videos with like and subscribe for more or anything like that. It's like, if you want to, you will, and if you don't want to, you won't, and it wouldn't matter anyway. But if nobody off the back of that came to buy my books or study with me, it would just simply be the case that I couldn't afford to make those videos anymore, or I couldn't afford to write these books anymore. Like, the only reason I was able to spend 18 months, 2 years writing The Rudimental Drummer is because I was making money on the side from my other book sales and from teaching and from gigging, which is obviously part of that portfolio you'd built up. There's no way I could have afforded to write it as book one.
No.
But if people weren't buying those books, if people weren't paying in somewhere, it's not that I, resent them or anything like that, but it wouldn't happen. The art wouldn't get made. And I think that's part of a bigger problem which we address in the creative practitioner about money in the arts. People on a night out, they'll spend £7 on a burger, but they won't spend £7 to get into a venue with live music.
No, and in the States they do. They have the door charge.
Yeah, and it's like, fine, that's your choice, but then when the art stops, when the live music stops, or when those videos stop, that's why.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah. They so what frustrates you? about the state of it all, or is that it? Is that the not the gratification, not the need for it, but it's okay, isn't it, to be open, honest, and say like I have to earn a living from this.
Ironically, the professional side doesn't frustrate me for the most part. It used to, and I think I've found a way of working for myself that at least pays the bills. You know, I'm never going to be rich, but I'm comfortable. I cover the mortgage, and that's okay. I think. I mean, I try very hard not to be frustrated by things these days. I try very hard to give up that side of me, but I think more than anything else, if you really pushing for an answer, it's certain attitudes and certain ways of doing things. Attitudes generally, and sometimes it's perfectly innocuous and innocent, and sometimes it's intentionally incompetent or intentionally ignorant, and that really bothers me.
Right.
For example, I'm not going to name names. One of my books, I hired session players to record the demo tracks for the play-along material. I'd done some play-along material, and I hired session musicians to produce. I hired one to write some jazz charts for me, and I hired 3 to actually play those, and they were going to be drumless play-alongs for the book. And to this day, one of those people has not invoiced me for that work, and so hasn't been paid. And that staggers me, and it really, really frustrates me, because, and it's like me trying to pay them, right? I said to them, you just need to drop me an invoice, and I'll get you paid straight away. 2 of them, fine, here you go, emailed it the next day, done, paid, thank you very much, job done. This third one never got it, and they are a musician purporting to work in this industry and comport themselves like that, you know, present themselves like that and do business like that. And it was frustrating for a lot of reasons, because they did a really good job. You know, they did a really good job, and I'm really pleased with what they produced for me. So at least let me pay you for it properly, and at least do yourself the service of acting professionally. And the attitude of some students, I absolutely understand. For many people it's a hobby and they just want to come and enjoy themselves, and that's absolutely fine. But when those same students complain that they can't do something, they know what the answer is, they know what the solution is, and they won't do it. And the attitude that is prevalent online of quick fixes, you get a lot of courses, you get a lot of recommendations for courses. Again, I'm not going to name any names, but like such and such 30-day hand course and such 30-day this, that, and the other. And I see it every day on various drumming communities. I want to learn to play the drums. What should I do? And it staggers my mind. It staggers me, blows my mind. And then the top comments are like, oh, the such and such 30-day beginner's drum course. And it's like, in any other walk of life, you know what you want to do. If I want to learn the piano, what's the first thing I'm going to do? I'm going to go and find a piano teacher. And I'm going to learn how to do it properly. And I'm going to study the piano. And it's not just drums. This isn't a drum unique problem. This is a societal thing. I don't want to say it's a societal problem, because then I'm like old man yelling at clouds. But it is endemic in all walks of life. Of maybe it is shying away from hard work. You know, maybe I am just an old man yelling at clouds. But why should that be a question? You know, I want to learn to play the drums. What should I do? You know what you should do. You know what you should do, but you don't want to. And the innocuous and the innocent ones, I have a lad, and he's a bright lad, and he's progressing well. And he has two teachers. He has me, and he goes to lessons at school. And I'm absolutely, I don't bat an eyelid. That's great. The more he's playing, the more he's playing. But it sounds like his other teacher and I have opposing views on roles, how roles are formed. And this lad gets frustrated because he sees me play a role and he can't do it the way I can do it. So he defaults to the way he's been shown elsewhere. And I try to say to him, look, it's just a different thing. They don't produce the same result. Let's think of these as two different things. And he said something like, yeah, but I can't do it fast like you. And it's like, you're 13 years old.
Yeah.
It's going to take...
Ready yet.
You, of course you can't do it fast like me yet. Of course you can't. But for the love of drumming, don't let that change your approach because you think the other approach is going to be easier. Just accept that it's a hard thing to do and it's going to take you a bit of time and a bit of elbow grease. And it's not like the lad is work shy. He practices and he progresses well and he's a nice lad. It's totally innocuous, totally innocent, right? But it's that broader mindset of, well, I've seen you playing fast and I want to play fast. Tell me how to do that right now. And that bothers me. That frustrates me. I think because I have gone through the rigmarole of pulling myself up to quite a high standard, it frustrates me when I see people trying to undermine that process in themselves or in others.
I accept that.
Yeah.
I accept that. That's a big one. I mean, I don't get frustrated anymore until it becomes personal. You're a bad teacher. And I'm like, well, am I? I mean, okay, if there are areas for improvement, of course. In one of the hats I wear, as you know, I assess, not only diplomas, but I'm assessing for a BA Honours course on music business and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And we get moderated. So somebody else checks my work to say that, right, wrong, or indifferent. I get frustrated when people just throw, pain around. I don't get frustrated anymore if they're not willing to do it. I used to.
Yeah.
It used to hurt. It used to hurt.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I understand. I totally understand what you're saying. I totally understand where you're coming from.
And don't get me wrong. It's not just frustration at people not wanting to practice. That's not it. I think you understand the sort of nuance there that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
When students come and they say, I'm really sorry, I've not practiced this week. I'm like, that's okay. It's your life. That's fine. It's when there's the conflicting, I don't know, I'm yelling at clouds, but it's like they want to improve and still won't do it, but get frustrated when they won't do it. That's a frustrating thing. But the rudimental drummer was written, I've learned in hindsight, it was written to address that frustration about the general attitude towards the art form itself. So many people will say things like, do I really need to study the rudiments? And that bothers me. I'm like repeating what I said earlier about what the art form deserves. You've got nearly 700 years that this art form has been developing for.
Yeah.
And you think you don't need to study that. And
so where can I and others get a copy of that?
It's available everywhere. It's available on Amazon internationally. It's available on Kindle. It's available as a digital PDF and as a paperback through my own website,
which is
jonathancurtis.co.uk.
And actually, looking at that, if one's to go to the publications section, people will discover your love for the art form through those publications. Is there one that they should start with?
It really depends on what they are looking to achieve. The rudimental drummer is not, aside from a small collection of compositions at the end, it is not something for the music stand. It is a textbook. Now, if you are a drummer who is really in practice mode, and I really want to get stuck in, that's probably not the one to start with, because it's more a conceptual. It doesn't mean you can't practice from it. You can, but it's a let's really unpack this as an idea.
Yeah.
So people that are really looking to dig in on the snare drum virtuoso is a collection of technical studies for that purpose, and it will take you all the way as high as you want to go. I mean, there are very few pieces of work in the world more difficult than some of the pieces in that book.
Yeah.
If you are a drum kit player, that would not be the way to go, because it's not drum kit centric at all. So something like Linear Freedom or Broken Time Drumming give you a good insight into my approach. I mean, of the drum kit books, I think Broken Time Drumming is the one I'm most proud of. I think that one's a very comprehensive and a nice balance between the conceptual understanding and a practical do this.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Johnny, I think that's a great place to push pause. Let's not end. There's more to unravel.
Sure.
Let's do it again.
Absolutely, I'd love to.
Thanks so much for taking the time. It's a glorious day. I hope you can get out there and enjoy a bit of it.
I will. I'm going to have a bite to eat now. Then I've got a student at 1, and then I've got a meeting with a videographer to discuss a new project.
And there we are.
Full circle. Yeah.
So, Jonathan Curtis, jonathancurtis.co.uk. The Rudimental Drummer is out now. I shall certainly be getting a copy, and I advocate that everybody does. So, Johnny, thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you at a Pizza Express soon.
Near you. Absolutely.
Yeah.
My thanks. See you soon.